Hey guys, it's 2 days out from Raids 2, a very big update coming to the game. And so this video is just going to be me giving some of my predictions on some of the item prices and what I think they're going to be useful for. So this is just for fun. Don't make any investments or sell stuff, or don't do anything based on what I say here. This is just me speculating and having some fun guessing what might happen. I want to hear what you guys think as well, so if you disagree with anything I say here or have your own predictions you want to make, just post them down in the comments below. So there isn't too many new items that are coming out with Raids 2. Compared to Raids 1, there's very little. We got a new set of armor, which is the Justiciar armor. Probably pronouncing that wrong, but that is how I'm going to pronounce it for this video. Then we have the Grazi Rapier and the Sanguinesti Staff, the Scythe of Vidr, and the Avernic Hilt, which makes a new defender. So I think Raids 2 is probably going to have quite a bit of regular loot, like skilling supplies and alkables. They're putting a lot of that on drop tables, and I think they're going to need it for Raids 2 to make it worthwhile. I don't think the new items are going to be worth nearly as much as Raids 1, so they're going to have to buff the drop table with something. I expect blood runes will be on there, lots of blood runes. I imagine there'll be a fair amount of herbs, and then some gems or some raw fish, something like that. And so those items I think will probably go down, whatever is on the regular drop table, unless you use a ton of it in the raids. Blood runes might go up because you use them for the staff and you use them for the new scythe. So the new hilt that's going to be dropped, the Avernic Hilt, I'll start with that. So you combine that with the Dragon Defender and you can make a new defender, the Avernic Defender, which actually has a pretty big upgrade over the Dragon Defender. It has 2 extra strength, about 5 extra in the attack bonuses. It doesn't degrade or anything. It requires 70 attack and defense to equipped. So there's no drawbacks to this. It's just purely a DPS upgrade for melee. Anywhere you would normally use a defender, you're going to want to use this, which is a lot of places. So I think this is going to be a pretty sought after item. I have a feeling it's going to be one of the more common drops though. If the drop table is similar to how Raids 1 is, with Dragon Claws being a little bit more common than the Kodai Wand and Twisted Bow and that sort of stuff, I think the Avernic Hilt is going to be one of the more common items. But because of how useful it is, or how many places it's useful, even though it's common, I'm predicting this is probably going to be, I'm going to go ahead and say 2 different time periods. So I think right on release, I think this is probably going to go for, within the first few days, it's probably going to be going for around 200 mil. After prices have settled, I think it will go down quite a bit. I think this is probably going to be sitting around the 50 to 100 mil area, would be my guess. Next up is the Sanguinesti Staff. This thing is actually pretty good now because they changed some stuff about it. It actually hits a little bit higher than the Toxic Trident now, and it has a healing effect. And it doesn't cost too much. I think it used to cost more. Now it only costs 3 blood runes per cast, which as of right now is a little under 700 GP per cast, while the Toxic Trident costs, I think the Toxic Trident costs about 550 per cast, so it's only a little bit more expensive than that. So I think it might be used over the Toxic Trident purely for the DPS increase, even though it costs a little bit more. And then with the healing effect on top of the DPS increase, I think this is going to be used over the Toxic Trident just about anywhere if you can afford it. So because the Trident is such a used item, it's used in tons of places, and this is going to be the new best Trident to use, I think it's going to be fairly expensive. I'm predicting it's probably going to, on release, is going to be going for around 300 to 400 mil, I would say. And after it's been out for a little while, I think it's going to stabilize more at around 200 mil. I take that back. It's going to stabilize more around 150 to 175 mil. And then the Grazi Rapier, I think this is going to be the most expensive item. It doesn't degrade, and it's slightly better than the Tentacle Whip, which is going to make it useful tons of places. Anywhere that is stab weak, so anywhere you'd normally use like a Hosta for, you're probably going to want to use this. And then anywhere that's just kind of like neutral, it doesn't really matter what type of attack you use, you're going to want to bring this because it's going to have the best strength and attack bonus of any melee weapon, which is going to make it a super wanted item. Tons of people are going to want to get their hands on this. But at the same time, it's only slightly better than the Tentacle Whip. Like, you're going to be spending tons of money for just a small upgrade. So only the very rich are going to actually be able to buy this. So taking that into account, I think on release, the Grazi Rapier is going to be around 500 mil. 500 to 700 mil, I would say. But after it's been out for a little while, once it stabilizes, I think it's going to stabilize more around 200 to 250 mil. And then the final item, the Scythe of Vidr. I think this is sort of like the dark horse. Like I haven't heard much about this item, but it could actually end up being the most expensive item. When I tested it out on the Tourney World, it wasn't good at all, but they have changed a few things about it. It used to be a bit slower. I think they sped it up to 5 ticks, so only 1 tick slower than a whip, and it hits anything larger than a 1x1 monster 3 times. But the 3 hits aren't full damage. The first hit is 100% damage, second hit is 50% damage, and the third hit is 25% damage. And it's got fairly good stats. I think if you do the math, it works out to be a little bit better DPS than most, or than every weapon on most bosses, but you don't have a shield slot, so some bosses that could be pretty bad, or maybe not. Maybe, like I said, this, in my opinion, this is the dark horse. I haven't heard much about it, but it could actually be the best thing because the DPS on it is better than a lot of stuff at a lot of bosses that are bigger than 1x1. It does cost money to use though. You have to charge it, and it takes 1/100th of a vial of blood and 3 blood runes for every charge, and I think you use 1 charge every time you attack. So you're spending basically as much as you would on the staff for every attack, plus the however much the vials of blood cost, 1/100th of that. So that cost could offset some of the demand for it. And if a monster isn't bigger than 1x1, it can hit 3 1x1 monsters in a row. They have to be positioned right unless they change that. When I tested it in the Tourney Worlds, you had to have them like lined up in the correct way for the scythe to hit 3 monsters at once, which was kind of annoying to do, but it could possibly be a pretty good weapon to train with now if you're rich and can afford to spend tons of money on blood runes. But then again, you never see anyone training with like a tentacle whip, so I doubt people are going to train with this unless it's like actually a really big XP increase over other methods. So this one could either be a big flop or the most expensive item of all. I'm going to go ahead and say on release, I'm going to put this at, it's going to be going for around 500 to 7 mil like the rapier. But after it's been out for a little while and prices have stabilized, I'm going to go ahead and say that the Scythe of Vitor will be 100 to 200 mil. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a lot more, if it's more than the rapier, but I think that's what I'm going to go ahead and predict. 100 to 200 mil area after it's been out for a little while and the prices are pretty stable. So those 3 new weapons and the defender, and then there's 1 set of armor. So really not a whole lot of items like I said. So let's go over the armor now. The armor, the Justiciar armor. It's really overpowered, but it's not extremely useful in a lot of situations unless it's going to be super useful for Raids 2, which I'm actually kind of predicting it will be super useful there. But things like the bulwark is extremely overpowered, but it's very cheap because you just don't need defense bonuses like that in very many situations. The Justiciar armor basically it reduces damage based on how much defense bonus you have, which is a pretty overpowered effect, and it has really high defense bonuses as well. You have to be wearing the full set for it to work though, and it doesn't have any strength bonuses, so if you want DPS, you would not be wearing this armor. So the only places I can think of where this is actually going to be useful is for Inferno. It's going to actually make Inferno a lot easier than tanking on your, if you have an alt account, tanking at a boss and then just attacking it on your main account. It would be helpful in that situation. And then the other one is Raids 2. I think it's going to be useful there. But that is still very few places compared to the other weapons that we already went over. So I'm going to go ahead and put this on release. I think each piece is going to be going for around the 200 mil area. But after it's been out for a little bit and prices are stable, I'm going to say for the Justiciar armor, it's going to be around, I'm going to say around 50 to 100 mil per piece. So that is all the items. I want to know what you guys think. What are your predictions on the prices? This is just a fun video to look back at in the future. See how wrong I am about the prices, or maybe give myself a pat on the back if I'm right. So thank you guys all for watching, and see you in the next video, which will probably be a Raids 2 video on the release date.